For decades, it was a war fought in the shadows. A deadly, undeclared conflict waged with spies, assassins, computer viruses, and proxy armies. From the 1979 Islamic Revolution that turned Iran from an ally into an adversary to the covert operations that defined their modern rivalry, Iran and Israel perfected the art of indirect warfare. But in June 2025, shadows vanished. A simmering conflict erupted into open flame, pushing the Middle East and the world to the edge of a terrifying new reality. This is the story of how the long war came into the light and what it means for us all. The catalyst was nuclear. By early 2025, international inspectors confirmed Iran was enriching uranium to 60% purity, a hair's breadth from the 90% needed for a nuclear weapon. For Israel, which views a nuclear-armed Iran as an existential threat, a red line had been crossed. With diplomatic talks collapsing and a belief that the window of opportunity was closing, Israeli leaders made a fateful decision. On June 13, 2025, Israel unleashed Operation Rising Lion. This wasn't just a bombing run. It was a new doctrine of 21st century warfare designed for systemic shock. Months in advance, Israeli special forces had secretly pre-positioned assets inside Iran. The first wave of the attack wasn't from jets, but from what military analysts call ungentlemanly robots, swarms of small, explosive drones. They were activated to cripple Iran's air defenses and communications, creating chaos and blinding the Iranian military before the main strike even began. Only then, with Iran's command and control in paralysis, did the main assault force arrive. Over 200 Israeli fighter jets streaked across the sky, hitting more than 100 targets. They struck the heart of the nuclear program at Natanz and Arak, but they also executed a devastating decapitation strategy, killing top military leaders, including the powerful commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, General Hossein Salami, and key nuclear scientists. The goal was clear, not just to delay the nuclear program, but to permanently cripple Iran's military capacity and destabilize the regime itself. Iran's retaliation was furious and massive. In the days that followed, an estimated 450 ballistic missiles and over 1,000 one-way attack drones were fired at Israel. This was not a symbolic gesture. Some missiles, armed with cluster munitions, punched through Israel's defenses, causing death and destruction in cities like Haifa and Beersheba. But ultimately, the retaliation was a strategic failure. A multi-layered shield of Israeli and American air defense systems, Iron Dome, David's Sling, Arrow, and U.S.-operated DAD batteries, intercepted the vast majority of the threats. It was a stark demonstration of the immense military technological gap between the two nations. But this direct attack was only possible because of a deeper preceding failure. For years, Iran's grand strategy was forward defense, using its powerful axis of resistance proxy network to deter a direct attack on its homeland. But in the 18 months before the war, Israel systematically dismantled its shield. Devastating campaigns weakened Hamas in Gaza and, critically, Hezbollah in Lebanon, killing its leader Hassan Nasrallah and destroying much of its arsenal. The collapse of the Assad regime in Syria severed the vital land bridge Iran used to arm its proxies. By June 2025, the axis was exhausted, a shadow of its former self. When the attack on the Iranian heartland finally came, the response from the proxies was a deafening silence. Weakened and facing their own destruction, they stayed on the sidelines, exposing the catastrophic failure of Iran's grand strategy. Just as the world held its breath, the conflict went global. On June 22nd, the United States entered the war directly. In a stunning display of military power, B-2 stealth bombers flew a 36-hour round-trip mission from their home base in Missouri to strike Iran's most heavily fortified nuclear site at Fordo. At Fordo, a target buried so deep inside a mountain, it was considered impervious to all but America's most powerful bunker-buster bombs. The stated rationale was to finish the job Israel had started. But this action transformed the U.S. from a supportive ally into a direct co-belligerent. This was backed by a massive show of force, tens of thousands of troops, 3 aircraft carrier groups, and a non-stop air bridge of refueling tankers to support sustained operations. Yet, Washington's strategy was characterized by a profound and dangerous ambiguity. President Trump issued maximalist threats on social media, demanding Iran's unconditional surrender. But in the same breath, he expressed a desire to avoid a wider war and even voiced public anger at Israel for violating the fragile ceasefire he helped broker. This high-risk madman theory approach is intended to keep Tehran off balance, but it creates an immense danger of miscalculation, where one wrong move by either side could trigger an uncontrolled spiral into all-out war. The crisis sent shockwaves through the international community, revealing a world increasingly fractured along geopolitical lines. China, Iran's biggest customer for sanctioned oil, condemned Israel's military adventurism, but stopped short of any concrete support, cautiously balancing its economic interests against the risk of confronting the United States. For Russia, the war was a strategic gift. It diverted Western attention and resources away from Ukraine and drove up oil prices, benefiting Moscow's economy. While offering to mediate, Russia provided no military aid, its main goal being to prevent a pro-Western regime from emerging in Tehran. The European Union, meanwhile, was sidelined. It pushed for diplomacy and de-escalation, but was largely ignored by Washington and hamstrung by its own internal divisions, highlighting a growing rift in the transatlantic alliance. At the heart of this war, and its terrifying future, remains the nuclear question. The military strikes did not eliminate Iran's nuclear program. They only delayed it. The knowledge, the scientists, and the will remain. And here is the ultimate dangerous irony. The war to stop Iran's bomb may be the very thing that guarantees it. Analysts overwhelmingly agree that the attacks have proven to Tehran that without a nuclear deterrent, the regime is vulnerable to conventional assault. Survival instinct will now likely compel Iran's leadership to pursue a bomb at all costs. This could lead to a mowing the grass scenario, an endless, bloody cycle of secret Iranian development followed by repeated Israeli and U.S. strikes. The nightmare scenario, a regional proliferation cascade where a nuclear Iran compels Saudi Arabia, Turkey, and Egypt to develop their own weapons, creating a multipolar, nuclearized, and terrifyingly unstable Middle East. So, could this lead to World War III? While a direct global war remains a low probability, the risk is increasing. The most plausible pathway is what analysts call the entanglement scenario. A long, resource-draining war for the U.S. in the Middle East would consume its military assets and political attention. This could be perceived by America's other rivals, China and Russia, as a historic window of opportunity to advance their own ambitions. In Taiwan or Ukraine, while the U.S. is distracted and overstretched, a crisis in one theater could enable and encourage a crisis in another, linking regional wars into a global confrontation. A fragile ceasefire, brokered by the U.S., is technically in place, but it was violated almost immediately, and few believe it will hold. The core issues that started this war remain dangerously unresolved. The Middle East is on a knife's edge, and the shock waves are being felt across the globe. The world is watching, waiting, and wondering if we are about to step back from the precipice or fall over it.